Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to talk about anterior pituitary hormones. So in the last video we talked about posterior pituitary hormones. In this video we're going to talk about anterior. So quick note, I don't think I mentioned this in my last video, so I just wanted to clarify the difference between anterior and posterior. So anterior means the same thing as ventral, right? And ventral and anterior basically both mean front. It's an anatomical term, and you'll hear this not just in the brain, but all throughout your body. So they'll say, like, your chest is on the anterior side of your body, or the anterior root of your spinal cord, or the basically anything in the front. You can say, the book is anterior to the book is the cover, posterior to the book is the back end, things like that. Posterior is basically the same thing as dorsal, which will translate to back. So the way I like to remember this is that you may have always heard like you need to get your posterior moving or um, looking your posterior or the posterior to your back or behind is basically like behind your back. So posterior to the book is the prologue or prologue, epilogue. I don't remember the name, but there's the section at the back or description of the author that's always in the back of the book. Another term is the posterior of your back is the gluteus maximus muscle, also known as your butt. So I like to think of it as posterior means butt. Funny way to think about it, if whatever helps, right? Okay, so let's get into the content of the video. The anterior pituitary is a special pituitary portion because there are specific hormones. Mainly, you're going to see these two and another one that are really crucial for reproduction and stimulating growth. All right. So that's the main function of anterior pituitary hormones. If I had to summarize it for you, it would be that it functions for reproduction and growth. Perfect. Okay, so let's break it down a little bit. In the last video, I talked about how the SCN and the PBN are the main signal senders to the posterior pituitary. In this one, for anterior pituitary hormones, it's actually a blood vessel rich region known as the median eminence. Median eminence. I hope I spelled that right. If it's not, please look in the book. I'm sorry for my spelling, but it's a blood vessel rich region in the hypothalamus. All right, so the median eminence is a blood-rich region in the hypothalamus. Remember, your hypothalamus is the portion of your brain that sends the signals to your pituitary gland. So the hypothalamus itself never secretes any hormones. It's the pituitary gland that does the dirty work, in other words. Um, this median eminence will, once it's a group of neurons, don't forget that, it's a group of neurons. That, when activated, will travel down the median eminence and will simulate the anterior pituitary hormones. Okay, so let's take a quick look at the main hormones that you need to know. First one is the growth hormone. Pretty self-explanatory, but the growth hormone stimulates bone growth and calcification. So it basically allows you to expand, for your bones to grow. Prolactin, I feel, is very self-explanatory if you can understand the roots of the word. Pro, meaning promoting, plus lactin, lact, meaning milk. So prolactin is basically the milk hormone, which stimulates milk production. Stimulates, not simulate. Stimulates milk production, right? So prolactin is stimulating milk production. That's really important because for females especially, the more prolactin you have, the more milk is produced. Yeah. Um, TSH, that is the thyroid hormone. It controls your metabolism, right? Adrenocorticotropin. All right. So very big mouthful to say, but if you break it down, you should see some familiar roots in there. Adreno, meaning the adrenal cortex. Cortico, corticosteroids, or also known as your cortex. Tropin. Tropin just basically means substance, hormone, things like that. So, adrenocorticotropin, this is the main hormone that actually starts your stress pathways, I believe. Um, it's basically a really big signal for a system that regulates your bodily function. So it actually simulates the release of cortisol, which I'm sure you all have heard of. Cortisol is the main hormone that is your stress hormone when you're really stressed. That's what causes your stress in simple terms. It also is responsible for getting you up in the morning. Your cortisol levels will peak early in the morning, and it will, alongside a raise in your body temperature, are the precursors of what's required for you to wake up, right? So adrenocorticotropin, it's also part of a big pathway that later on we'll talk about it. It releases this CRH, and it also causes immune responses as well. Um, responses, and it also has a role in metabolism as well. So pretty well-rounded, pretty well-versed, but yeah, ACTH is a pretty important one. Now, FSH and LH. Well, I think follicular stimulating hormone is pretty self-explanatory in itself. It stimulates the release of follicles, so sexual follicles, in since egg and sperm release. And luteinizing hormone has another role in that. It's basically menstrual and testicular cycle regulator. Oops. So these two alongside GR and H, we will be talking about in the next video. And these are really important because these three are in a cycle in all mammals. So not just humans, but in all mammals. So that would include monkeys or basically all the mammals you can think of. Every single one of them has these three, and they cycle. For women, it's every 28 days. For men, it's actually 90 minutes, which I think is an insane time frame difference. 1.5 hours versus a month. I thought that was insane. But anyhow, these three hormones work together to regularly cycle estrogen and testosterone to release follicles, making sure that our body is on the right path, the right mechanism, so on and so forth. So that's a big overview of it. We'll get more into detail in the next video. And these are actually the reproduction. That's where the reproduction comes from. Um, and I'll actually add in metabolism here. Uh, bullets. All right, so the last hormone we're going to talk about is lipotropin. Lipo, the root means fat. And furthermore, the role of this is actually very heavily involved in metabolism. Metabolism. Remember, metabolism is energy consumption, all right? That's what I mean by energy consumption and expenditure. Consumption, meaning gaining, using, and then expenditure, how it's using, how it's expenditure. Okay. As we can see, I'm terrible at spelling. Diture. There we go. Energy consumption, expenditure, and it's mainly involved in adrenal cortex regulation. So adrenal cortex, remember, that's the four F's. We'll get into that. It's a very interesting acronym. But it regulates adrenal cortex and it also works for fat breakdown, so on and so forth. So that's an overview of the anterior pituitary hormones. I hope you learned the main functions of the seven hormones. Remember, there's seven anterior and actually three posterior, but the third one is kind of similar to the second one in the posterior, so we just consider it as two. But for the sake of brain B, you need to know these seven, and you also need to know the two that I mentioned in the last video. Thank you all for watching. Have a great day and happy studying.